Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 2022 horror film Satanic Hispanics. This is episode 431. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
And if you don't let me go within 90 minutes, you're all going to die.
Joining us from Deep South Texas, David Bowles is a Mexican-American author and translator who teaches at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Among his 36 award-winning books are They Call Me Güero, Ancient Night, and The Prince and the Coyote. You're doing some really neat traveling on that book right now. David will begin his term as president of the Texas Institute of Letters in April. That blows my mind. Welcome, David.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here talking about this movie. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Congratulations, by the way. That sounds really, really cool.
That's amazing. Cool.
Yeah, being inducted was an honor, and being able to lead them is going to be just really cool. That is.
Yeah, and I'm going to have the first of our annual conferences in Brownsville ever. So the first time it'll be down in Brownsville. It'll be great.
Nice.
Love it. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
I think if David is Mexican-American author, I should be Nicaraguan-American attorney.
Okay.
I think we should alter your. You have the advantage of having a Hispanic last name, and so it's a little bit.
Yes.
With me, it's always like my last name is Bowles. Trust me, I'm Mexican-American. People are like, okay. Yeah.
But how satanic are either of you?
Oh my gosh.
We won't talk about that right now.
Yeah, no. Those are things that we keep in familia, right?
Yeah.
That's fair.
I am not Hispanic, but I am satanic. So
we love you for it, sir. Love you.
Yeah.
Okay. Satanic Hispanics is a 2022 American horror anthology film written by Alejandro Mendez, Demian Rugna, Lino Quevilla, and Pete Barnstrom, directed by Mike Mendez, Demian Rugna, Eduardo Sanchez, Gigi Salguero, and Alejandra Bugues, and starring a whole bunch of people who we will get to as we get to the individual stories. There's actually, I think there's the framing story, and then there are 4 stories. This is an anthology, just like the Amicus films or whatever. But what draws them all together is that they are stories directed by self-identified Hispanics about self-identified Hispanics, except for, well, no, I suppose Hammer of Zanzibar counts as well. So we'll get to all that. I'm going to just be acting as a moderator, and I will talk a lot less than I'm talking right now. Let's kick it off with opening thoughts. Let's get a few quick thoughts, and then we'll go into the topics. Let's go David, Julia, Drew, Tony, and then we'll go into looking at each of the stories, starting with the framing story. So, David, your opening thoughts. Is this your first time watching it, or had you already been exposed to this film?
Yeah, it's really weird because I had meant to watch it, but it kept slipping off my radar. And so, yeah, today was the first time that I had watched it. And for some reason, I thought I had watched it. I was like, yeah, Gigi Saul Guerrero, but I was thinking about the VHS 85, the most recent of the VHS anthology series has come out because she had like a really interesting short in that. But no, so I enjoyed 2 of the segments a lot, and 2 of them were like, all right. The tonal shifts were really interesting. The 2 more comedic ones I really wished had been shorter, and like maybe another slightly scarier one had been. I tell you what, basically everybody suffered from coming after the first one because the first one is just amazing. And then the others I enjoyed to varying degrees. There were some things that I just rolled my eye at because I know that I know there are stronger writers that could have been probably attached to a project like this. And, for example, Gigi Salguero's normal screenwriting companion was not writing for her on this. And I think that her work is not as strong when they're not working together. And so that's Shane McKenzie. So, I mean, yeah, I have lots of things to say, but overall, I was pleased with it, but I wasn't super excited about it. It's not something that I want to run around telling everybody, you gotta watch this. Oh my God. Except for maybe that first segment, because it's got some just amazing ideas.
Mm.
And I like all of that Argentinian director's film. So I was not surprised that I loved that first segment.
Very cool. Thank you. Julia, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy to see. I'm always happy to see Latino artists being recognized and getting to do fun stuff. And there's definitely some neat things. I mean, it's low budget, and they did a lot of creative things with it. I'm never a fan, as you know, of really gory things, and there was a lot of that here.
Mm.
But I definitely laughed out loud a few times. A couple of good jump scares, some really creative concepts. So it's kind of mixed bag for me.
Cool. All right. Drew, what about you?
I this was a recommendation that I made a few weeks back, so I do really enjoy this movie, and I definitely enjoyed rewatching it for tonight. I got to watch it with Jamie. Was her first time watching it. It was my second time watching it, and Jamie also got a kick out of it instead. I do think I agree with David that the first sequence is probably the strongest. However, I think the thing that oddly enough, for a movie like this, I think the thing that I was most invested in is the wraparound story. I thought the lore
Me too.
of the wraparound story was really interesting, and also as a sucker for a good monster, when Saint Death shows up at the very end of the movie with two entirely separate forms, by the way.
Yes.
I immediately wanted an action figure of that character to put in my home office.
Amen.
Yeah, it's so cool looking. I mean, there's good creature work throughout it, but that's definitely, I understand why that particular creature is the one that they put on all the posters and everything. It's just awesome. But yeah, it's a fun flick, and it's always fun to see the anthology format. So, and I also like that it's set in El Paso. So that there's a lot of things to like about it.
That first visage of Tony, I got to turn to you, but I got to ask this question in case anybody knows the answer. The Saint Death disguise that he first shows up in, wearing the hat and the white mask and the cloak, I've seen that design elsewhere, and I can't remember where, but but I've seen it. I think like in a Marvel comic, and so if anybody ends up able to place it, I'm totally interested.
It did kind of remind me of Wishmaster.
Wishmaster from the movie,
Yeah, from the movie, like the look of it. I don't know if that was.
I get that, but that's not what I'm thinking of.
intentional.
No. I'm thinking of a character that's literally in Marvel that had the hat and the white mask. So maybe I'm just imagining it. I just had a dream.
I mean, it is
But
sort of shades of V for Vendetta too.
yeah. Nah, something's gonna click into place. This is like one of those. This is this is a combination lock, and sometime the tumblers are gonna line up, and I'm gonna go, oh, there it is. Anyway, Tony, what about you?
Yeah, I actually really like it. I will say that, part of my enjoyment of it may be from seeing at Fantastic Fest and kind of being in the mix there where, there's people doing Q&A and you're kind of hanging out and talking about it and stuff like that. But I really liked it. I think the framing device is probably like one of the strongest things, and I think they did a really good job. It's interesting, it's funny, it's a really good way to hang everything off of. And I think this year, if I remember the year that this premiered, I think there were a lot of other movies that basically had the idea where you had a lot of people going, yeah, witchcraft is something that we're all kind of, even if you don't believe in it, like we're all part of, like you believe it in anyway. You do things like Like everybody knows, there was a I forgot there was a director, I want to say he was from Mexico, and he was or he at least filmed there, and he was going, yeah, everybody has like a witch that they go to, like, or
Hmm.
like their aunt has like, oh yeah, here's the number for my witch if you need to talk
Yeah,
and
like
stuff.
they're
So
granddad or
yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. Like, and they were talking. So there was throughout the fest, there was this kind of underlying Satanic Hispanics vibe
Well, it's like
that
how
you get
people
to in
look at
those movies.
horoscopes all the
Yeah,
time, even if they don't actually
yeah,
bring
and
it
so
believe.
there was one. I'd have to look it up again. There was one where they go like to the night market and stuff like that. But there was just a vibe throughout. So this was kind of a nice capper at the time to all of the movies I'd been watching throughout the fest. Like that were
Mm.
more horror. So I really enjoyed it. I was recommended to a lot of people, and I like the directors who and filmmakers who were doing all of these. Like I've seen their other works and was really excited. So yeah, I think it's fair to say, like, depending on what you like, you may find it uneven, or you may go. I don't think I met anybody who was like I was all in for every one, but I think that's the nature of anthology movies. It's pretty rare where you see somebody who you watch an anthology and you're like, every single one hit
Well,
from
we have
Yeah,
often commented about the Amicus movies that it would be good to have an Amicus movie that was made up of 5 stories that were basically the best story from
the
sure.
different
all
movies.
7 or 8 of them, rather
Yeah,
than, because there's always one that any given person could do without. It is interesting. This one has 2 funny ones and 2 serious ones. And
Yeah,
but we start out with The Traveler, which is the wraparound story, which Drew, I agree with you. I think this is one of the strongest wraparound stories I've seen for an anthology. I mean, like, we watched Vault of Horror, which the wraparound story for that is 5 dudes get into an elevator and it takes a real long time and they tell story. That's
yeah, yeah.
this
I mean,
this is his
I
best.
personally like Cat's Eye, just like the cat, just
Yeah,
getting into everything.
that's
Yeah.
true. The cat just goes from story to
Or
story.
like or like VHS, like cops come in and there's like a TV and there's a tape, and then and suddenly you're watching the tapes. And so
Yes,
yeah, yeah,
they,
no
we
attempt to like construct any kind of
we don't
reasonable.
have very high hopes for
Yeah,
the wraparound story.
but this one is really
Nevertheless,
really good. You're right. Yeah.
here you've got Efren Ramirez as the traveler, and I think Julia, it's so funny because I've heard you spend a lot of time talking about trafficking and so forth, and the world that the traveler is coming from seems to involve that. Can you tell us a little bit about the wraparound story and who the traveler is?
Well, gosh, I'm trying to even remember what his initial story was. I know
They,
we
they
find him.
the
We
the
find well,
cops
okay,
break
yeah, yeah, yeah,
into
yeah.
a yeah.
I know, yeah. So yeah, so the cop, right? I just immediately came back to me when I was like, well, I remember all the bodies. I'm like, oh
This
yeah,
is
yeah,
what
yeah.
happens when I just randomly call on a student and didn't tell them I was going to. I'm sorry.
I call on a what? On a student?
Student.
Oh,
Yeah.
were your students?
No, I mean, this is that feeling. I
I
I
see.
apologize for doing that to
That's
you.
okay. No, that's fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, right. So they find a place where a bunch of people have been, like Latinos have been being holed up and probably, like you said, trafficked. They're probably being forced to work and whatever. But now they're all dead, except for this one guy is alive in the back room. He's tied to a chair, and no, I'm sorry, he's not tied to there's a
He's
dead guy
chained.
who's tied to a chair. He's chained to our live guy who's in another room. He's trying to get out of a window.
Yeah.
And so there's a really dumb that part actually that gag just made me annoyed because it was really dumb that the guy that's in the chair is holding a gun and our hero is chained to him in another room. So every time he moves, the guy's arm lifts up and it looks like he's pointing the gun. But it's clear as day that this guy is not actually holding the gun in any way that's threatening. It's just his arms just being lifted. And there's also clear as day that something else near him is controlling him. But these guys, every time the gun comes up, they just start shooting the crap out of the dead body
Yeah.
instead of going, what's happening? Why is that? and like looking to where the chain's coming from until finally, like
I
these guys are idiots.
I unfortunately found that a lot more believable than you're than you're
Yeah,
suggesting that cops would keep
maybe,
firing
but
at them.
Keystone
Yeah.
Keystone Cops for sure.
You
But
know,
Yeah,
anyway, so
actually, it never occurred to me that might actually be the point of the gag is that the
that they're
cops are so
idiots.
trigger
yeah,
happy
yeah,
that
Yeah.
trigger happy
yeah.
count.
So anyway, so we find the guy. He's alive, even though he should be dead, because turns out he can't die unless the bad guy at the end gets him. So now he's going to tell us the whole story of his life. But basically, I don't know why he's telling them all this, given that he's trying to get out of there. Because he says if he doesn't get out in 90 minutes, everybody's going to die, and then he's still telling them all this story. So that's our setup. But I
So
love
the
that character.
movie can happen.
The
Yeah.
movie
Yeah,
happened.
exactly.
Thank you, Ryan George.
But I mean, there are
Yeah,
a couple of other things to add to this.
Yeah.
yeah, go for it.
Throughout the course of the conversation, he claims to have been born in Tenochtitlan, so he is saying that he is Mexica, that he's Aztec. Even though at a later point he talks about that this is not La Santa Muerte, it's San La Muerte, which is a male, death figure from South America, and that he made a deal for his wife and children's life in exchange for his it seems it's a really kind of convoluted backstory, and you're like, okay, so wait a minute, this must be at
I want it
some
known,
point.
David, that I said I wanted you on this for this reason. I was like, we should get David on this right away.
And he and so it's really interesting. So getting me, you also get all these fun things, like for
Yes.
example, all of the novel that he uses is it's like grammatically incorrect. So I was tortured the entire every time he would say something. Like there's a point where he's supposedly saying friend in novel to the overweight white cop,
Yeah.
who played by the guy from Heroes, whatever his name is.
I
And
think
he
of him
says,
as the guy from Alias, but yes, you're exactly
"Oh yeah,
right.
well, yeah, okay, yeah." Before he was on Heroes, he was on Alias, and he says "ignotl." In the first place, it's pronounced "ignotl," but "ignotl" just means orphan. It's "iknitl," which means friend, and you can't just say friend in Naruto. You have to say "you, who are my friend." You have to say something like "nikne," which means "you, my friend." "Oh, you, my friend." You have to append to the beginning of the word a possessive like pronoun. But people who are just like randomly looking up Naruto words on the internet, like the screenwriters of these segments, are just like grabbing the words and thinking that, oh, this is it's like Indo-European languages where you can just use the word by itself in the vocative. No, that's just not the way Naruto works. And so I was tortured because they're trying to make him seem like ancient and old, and for the most part it works. But anybody who speaks Naruto will be immediately. I mean, granted, how many of us are going to be watching that
Right.
film, right?
Well,
But
that's fantastic, and I really wish they had consulted you when they were making these.
Yeah,
so
more
this is my plea.
consulting.
This is my plea to all of you who were involved in making this film and who are going to make other films in the future using Naruto. I'm your guy. Reach out to me. I will charge you, a relatively reasonable fee to check the Naruto in your
Right.
place. Guys, come on. No mamen, por favor, yeah.
The other thing that really bugged me about that plot or that storyline was that the cops have just been told 2 seconds ago that this guy shows up in their records every decade for like the last
Oh, yeah.
100 years and hasn't aged. And yet when he says I can't die, they're like, ha ha ha. I'm like, dude,
And
that
he's
is
like, look at my
completely
hand,
consistent.
guys. And they still,
Right.
yeah.
And I'm like, it's completely consistent with the information you just got.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, he has Wolverine powers. I mean, yeah, his hand got fixed.
Oh, okay, but in fairness to the cops,
Yes.
if somebody claims to be immortal and have magical powers in the world that we live in, and
Correct.
like all horror movies, you have to assume
That's
until these characters encounter the supernatural, they are living in a world that is very much like ours.
Yeah.
So you would be skeptical.
I would
I mean,
indeed. Yes.
you should be in quotes. I would not be skeptical. I would immediately be on board
I
with
would
the whole
assume
immortal
that
thing.
he's like David Copperfield and he just is able to do some amazing shit.
The point
and,
is, you wouldn't be
yeah.
laughing. You'd be like trying to figure it out. Okay, what's
You'd
the
be like,
trick?
wow,
What's
this dude
going
has
on?
somehow infiltrated our
Yeah,
database
yeah.
Right.
with photos of himself. Why would you do something like that? And what kind of
Yeah.
abilities and how much money would it require? And maybe we should be treating him with a little more deference and like trying to figure out what he's trying to tell us with these weird stories. And it just, the cops, I mean, it's fine. You want to make the cops incompetent, but it would have been nicer to have them be a little bit more competent.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
But it's
so
still
the
a cool
first.
story. The wraparound story is still awesome. I still love it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, and to some extent, it also sets a theme of dumbass cops.
Yeah.
And these are possibly your least dumbass cops, because at least they're really trying to figure out what's going on, and they're a little sarcastic, but they're sarcastic within the world that they're working in the world that they think, that it's the way it operates. Okay, and we'll get back to the traveler's story. But the first story it's so interesting in these, unlike in the Amicus pictures, each of these stories is directed by a different director.
Yeah.
And the first one is Tambien Lovi, which is by Demian Rugna, who made Tony.
Wait, can I tell you a story really quick? When that
Yeah,
came up, Jason goes,
yeah, I was reading the screen. Yeah,
he read the screen. He goes, "También lo vi," and I said, "I saw it too." He goes, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know. I thought you weren't looking at the screen." I'm like, "No, I'm
No, that's
telling you
not
what it
true.
means."
That's
It's
too
really
funny.
funny. I'm just translating.
yes,
I,
yes, yes.
and you have enough Spanish that you should have caught that, dude.
Yeah,
What?
Yo,
it was
I
funny timing.
know. I just wasn't thinking. Oh my goodness. So yeah, Tony, what was the Demian Rugna film that we interviewed him for? It came out like very recent.
When evil lurks, right? When evil lurks, right?
Yes, When Evil
Which is
Lurks.
awesome. Oh my god, that movie's so good.
Oh my God.
He's
The
great, and he's a
Yeah.
really nice guy. But yes, I was so stoked to see more of his work. So and it's a really strong segment too. So
Yeah, and it feels like part and parcel with Terrified. It feels like it was in the same universe as Terrified to some extent.
yeah, I still hate that Terrified has such a similar name to Terrifier. Which if
Oh
that's
yeah,
Terrifier's your bag, that's cool. But so many people go, "Why the clown movie?" And I go, "No,
no,
it's
the
Terrified, different thing." And I
crazy ass
hate that they get mixed up.
cosmic
But
horror in the walls movie. Yeah,
yeah, oh
man,
man, he's so good. He's so good at what he does.
that segment. I mean, look, right there. There's a one conceit in that segment
Yeah, set it
that
up for us
deserved to
because
be it
yeah.
deserved to be its own movie. So the conceit is that the main character in the segment is a Rubik's Cube champion. Like he's like Argentina's like best solver of puzzles, and his sister is trying to get him. She's away in some other country, maybe the U.S. It seems like, or maybe she's in Japan because that's where the competition is going to be held.
Yeah.
She's encouraging him in this video call both to use English to practice it and also to get off his ass to get out of their deceased father's house and go to Japan to this competition. But he's he suffers from all kinds of weird tics, and he's probably on the spectrum and stuff like that. And he's just having a really hard time because he's seeing something. And what he's done is he has created, using the same like mental algorithm, the moves that he goes through to solve the Rubik's Cube. He's using them to flash lights in his house in the hallway in a certain in that same pattern, and it reveals something in the spiritual realm for a brief moment. And he keeps trying to like just random people like the pizza delivery person or whatever. Look, can you see? And he does all the little thing, and they can't see it. And so he finally calls this supernatural podcast conductor and has him come over, and this guy does see something, and it freaks him out so much that he leaves, but then later he comes back, and it's because he's seen his mother, and he went to go check on her, and she's just died. And so the guy has the puzzle solver has opened up this portal. Now I say that, and there's all kinds of horrific things that happen. There's some kind of creature that seems to appear to different people as different beings. But all of that is kind of undercut by the very, very last scene, where because he sent like a photo of this creature to his sister, and she's like, "It's just you. You've just taken a picture of yourself. Were you pulling my leg? What the hell's wrong with you?" And then he sees himself, and there's like a quick flashback to the pizza delivery person that seems to suggest that maybe he's just mentally imbalanced and has imagined this whole thing. I much prefer the idea that he's opened a portal by using this algorithm.
Wow, you got a lot more out of that ending than I did.
didn't. Yeah, no. To me, the ending implied that he might be dead now. like I thought because he seems to be seeing himself on the other side of the portal.
Yeah.
Well,
But that's
he
what.
he is dead because the traveler implies that that he is possibly one of the dead bodies
Yeah.
from the opening massacre scene.
Well, that would mean that he's gone from Argentina to El Paso, and that's yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
that
It
is
was a
the
little
implication.
confusing, but it was interesting for sure.
I feel like this is a problem, and I hate coming up with critiques because, I really liked this on balance, but I feel like this is a problem with this and a couple of other points in the film where I feel like they really could have used about 90 minutes, and instead they've got to sort of wrap it up. And sometimes what you wind up with is an ending that is a little disappointing because you don't, I could have used some more explanation.
yeah. But I mean, I'm
you know.
sorry, but compared to the complete lack of explanation in Los Nahuales, I mean, I think
Correctamundo.
this is
Yes,
I
this
let's.
is this is actually a pretty
I
coherent
think
story.
I think also this is what happens when you have a movie this is essentially a jam comic book as a movie. And for
Mhm.
those who don't know what a jam comic book is, it is when, every few pages the artist changes.
Yeah.
And I feel like the sort of inconsistencies with this, for me, yes, they are there. I found it charming, I guess, because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen and they're all bringing different things to the table. But I also, I guess I hand waved it a little bit away, and that the thinking that the traveler might not necessarily be a completely accurate narrator.
Yeah.
Like he's secondhand telling these stories.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I got you.
that was my excuse in my head when there was inconsistencies.
That is a
But
good one. Wow, that's really. I like that a lot, and also it means to some extent because Demian Rugna is off doing his own thing when he films his piece, and he comes back and he goes, "I got a piece." Probably, I'm guessing, I'm making this up. Tony, you can tell me if in the Q&As there was anything like this, but I'm going to bet that the frame story, those creating and producing the frame story, probably only had the most glancing understanding of what was actually in the stories that they were going to be talking about it. There's a vampire, there's a whatever, but so that which is why it's possible that Rubik's Cube guy is one of the dead in El Paso, or it's possible that we're not quite sure about that. Tony, was
Well,
there any reference?
also says he looks
Um,
like him. He doesn't say it is him. Yeah.
I don't remember if I remember correctly, and again, it's been a bit, and time over the past like 3 years, I think, or so, has been this weird nebulous thing. So I want to say that they gave people a fair amount of freedom, so they weren't as like, oh, you have to. Here's the framing story, and it has to be this.
Mm-hmm.
From what they were talking about, so they wanted people, they had the idea, they talk back and forth. Like, I think there was a pretty good camaraderie between filmmakers, because they wanted this to be something special, and the idea being that if it does well, let's do this more often, which I think is great. That's another part of this that I like, is like, let's get more of these voices. Let's
Yeah.
like, out there, let's keep doing this. That would be great. And hopefully it only just, you get more and more people and it starts a groundswell. That would be amazing.
I agree. Yeah.
But what I liked, what I remember though, is that it was a framework for people to work under and see what people brought to the table, and they kind of, I think it is closer to the jam comic idea, Drew. So not super beholden, but hey, let's talk it out, and here's what the framing story is, and here's how it kind of fits in. I don't think there was a hardcore, because then you don't allow people as much freedom once that happens, right?
All I can say is, just to, and I don't want to use the phrase "in my defense," but as a way of explaining the way I react sometimes to these things. I didn't hate any of these segments, but you guys know that for the past decade, I've been trying to get some things made in Hollywood around these types of stories. Horror stories, Latine, Chicane, Mexican American horror stories. In fact, I mean, full disclosure, G. Saul Guerrero was briefly attached to an adaptation of my book Border Lore that we were gonna do
Mhm.
back in 2017 we were gonna like do like 20-minute like webisode kind of stories, and then see if we couldn't get them picked up. But that was before we tried doing it with El Rey. And that was when I met Shane McKenzie and her and stuff like that. So um, I think a lot of when I because I know behind the scenes projects that have been languishing, written by really really good Mexican American screenwriters, that don't get made, and then I see that what strikes me as not the stories that are not up to the level of like scripts that are languishing
Hmm.
in development hell. That kind of thing just I can't help but, especially when it's like this, a Hispanic, a Latine production, I can't help but let that color my reaction to these stories. So that's purely a me problem, a purely like kind of insider view problem of
Yeah.
it. If none of that were true, I probably would have enjoyed these a lot more. The goofiness, so we'll get into the second segment in a second, but the goofiness of it was just kind of jarring to me. It felt like a skit on like Sábado Gigante or something. Like, what the fuck is this? It's just,
Exactly. Yes, it was like El Chispirito is a
it's
vampire,
as a
and he's
vampire.
yeah.
So
Chapulín
whatever. I
Colorado.
mean, colorín colorado, estoy
Chapulín
27.
Colorado. Yeah.
El
Oh.
Chapulín Colorado.
But no, I've felt that way before too, because people will come to me and they go, "Hey man, did you check out this particular thing?" And I'd be like, "I wanted to, but that asshole insulted me 10
Yeah,
years ago
exactly.
at a show." And so and they're like, "Well, nobody cares about that but you, Jason." And like, you're
Yeah,
right.
exactly. I mean,
Nobody.
and this is just our personal problems, man. It's like the baggage we bring. It's like we were talking about the eclipse, right? Like not wanting to be on the bandwagon of the eclipse because
Yeah.
we were those kids in high school that didn't want to be part of they didn't want to bandwagon, and so
Never let it be said that personal grievance ever leaves you as a prime motivator. I mean, that's
we're in our 50s and we're still like rah 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 rah.
I mean, I just saw somebody posting about how they had an ex that told them not to do something, and so then that led to a chunk of their career. And they're like, it wasn't all spite, but spite helped me. Like I have this
Oh.
career partially because of spite.
Yeah.
So
Many
funny.
many of my decisions are because my mom told me not to.
Oh, there you go. Solid. I mean, that's a tale as old as time. So you're in there. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, El Vampiro, which by the way is the name of a truly kick-ass Mexican horror movie that everybody should go and watch. It's in gorgeous black and white, and it's just a wonderful horror movie from like 1957. But anyway, this is El Vampiro, and it is straight up goofy comedy. It is as completely different from the previous story as you can get, but I have to say I felt real sad for them at the end. But I'm
I
gonna let
was
somebody
I
else
was
talk about it.
similarly rooting
Yeah,
for
for the
them.
vampires, yes.
I get that it's totally jarring. I will not deny that I did not laugh a lot during this sequence because it reminded me a lot favorably of What We Do in the Shadows, and in its lampooning of the vampire genre, and just the idea that a vampire is going around on Halloween because it's the only
Yeah.
time he can be openly a
I like
vampire.
that too.
Yeah, it made me laugh.
It made me laugh.
And how everybody treats him too, because he is kind of like he's like slightly
Like
overweight, and
dumpy.
like everyone's like he's not a smooth vampire.
No.
And even the exasperation of his wife, his significant other, comes to pick him up like, oh, I told you, like why, like
Well, and
all
like
of that interplay was hilarious to me too. I know it's pretty broad, but it still worked. It worked on the second time I watched it too. And yes, it does fit in with all of the shows that you were talking about. Like it feels like a skit, but a really well done version of that.
By the way,
that kind of
though,
skit.
just last week when we were doing Jacob's wife, I poised the question of why we don't see the classic movie vampire as much, and this is why, because
Right.
like it's when we do see it, it is usually in a parody.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's very like Jacob's wife plays it straight, but most of the time, if you see a Dracula type vampire, it's played as a gag.
Mm.
Oh, I
And
love it. Just I love even the cops being like, "Oh, that's a really good effect of this beheaded guy," and then he tastes the blood.
Oh,
and
that
he's
was
like,
brilliant.
"It's real."
Yeah.
That was so
I
good.
know I'm the guy who always is against broad comedy, and because I'm just a dweeb that way. But I liked this. I actually really enjoyed this
Me too.
segment, and
I have to say, I'm also like not a big fan of Eduardo Sanchez, so that's. I'm sorry, Eduardo, if
Coloring
you
your
happen to be listening, I'm sorry, bro. I'm just not.
I
Not
I
everybody likes my books either, man. I don't know what to tell you, but
yep.
I guess my biggest problem with it is that I don't think the ending is as earned as you like. I think we are bringing something to the ending that makes us feel more for them than it's
Mm.
actually been earned by the segment. And I
Right.
would have liked to have
That's
seen
fair.
that relationship between the two of them more interwoven. We just get her like haranguing him at the beginning, and then we get her picking him up at the end, and it just doesn't feel like if they
Well,
had been
that's
out
true. I see your point.
together, maybe, or I don't know. It just like if the relationship is like the emotional core, like make the comedy
Right.
like see that's what I'm talking about. It's just not particularly good writing. And then like there's another way of making them be exposed to the sun. The guy has lived for 500 years. He's not going to let like a little slit of light in a dumpster like burn him to death. He just hold the
I
plastic
actually
down.
kind of agree with you about that.
Ridiculous.
Well,
Like
I had
make the
competing thoughts
wind
about
blow
that.
really hard. Like that's like
I
easy
think it
easy
would have been
fix.
funny if the garbage people had shown up right then and like
Yeah,
picked up
and had like
something.
it had lifted it up, and then it had been
Right.
dumped
Yeah,
into
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
garbage truck, and it had burned up and just on a big pile of garbage. Just so many things they could have done instead of, oh, I guess this is the end. There's light coming through this crack. What the? It just
Nah,
so
I'm
yeah,
with
it was
you.
problematic. I mean, it was problematic in a what's the word I want to use in terms of just craft. It was just
Hmm.
not well done, and it has done very little help by coming right after Yo también lo vi, which is
Yeah.
just a
Well,
badass.
and what Jason was saying that I mean, as far as the relationship goes, what Jason was saying about how you can use like all these stories could be a 90-minute story in themselves. I
Yeah,
mean, you couldn't really have both the comedy and develop the relationship in this short
I mean,
amount of
I
time.
laughed at this, but I thinking about it, I agree. You could take out a couple of the beats of the comedy and have spent more time with you. You could have had a couple of beats with them getting away.
yeah,
It's shocking that they
Or
die. I was really shocked by that because it just seems like they should be able to get out of this.
yeah.
But it's horrible.
I've spent a lot of time over the past 2 years writing and editing 22-page comics.
Yeah,
And I just feel that you can squeeze more out of 22 minutes of screen time than people believe. I mean, I just
yeah,
it's like tightening up your pacing. It's like making the hard choices, like you say, dropping a couple of beats that you don't need that are repetitive. There were multiple repetitive beats that
yes.
you just used one. All you need is one or two times for him to be kind of humiliated in public, and that's enough. You can. I don't know. Anyway, that's
No, I'm with you. I'm with
it's
you.
a craft thing, and I mean, not every maybe somebody will say to me, "Well, it's just it's just an anthology of dorky horror stories. What are you making such a big deal? They're trying to win an Oscar." But I don't know. I'm a writer. I take
You can
craft
always
seriously.
do better. Sure.
Yes, I do better. Yeah.
I don't think your criticisms are entirely unfair, but I again, I've watched this movie twice. Both times, him failing to hypnotize two cops at the same time,
Oh yeah,
I
that was
was
pretty
rolling.
good.
And so, like,
I wouldn't take
too.
that part out because I do think it's really, really great. I agree with you.
Yeah, me
I
Um,
too.
I do think the trash can thing, I will, like, outside of his line of, oh, this is so undignified, or whatever
that is
he says, I do think, like, why couldn't you find a better place to hole up from the sun? Like, why not just get in the trunk of your car or something? Like,
Mm.
there's
one other stuff.
that did bug me, and it bugged me more on the second time, but
I
not without its own entertainment
Yeah, I mean, I guess they
value.
don't want you to take it seriously, but when like the writer or the director or somebody doesn't want you to take it seriously, they want it all just to be a joke, but they also want to have an emotional payoff at the end, and you can't have an emotional payoff if there's not verisimilitude,
I
right?
think
If
you're
you're not
right.
believability.
If it's essentially an SNL sketch where you're not supposed to take any of it seriously, then you don't quite get the pathos that you could
Yeah.
have. Yeah, that's true. You kind of have to. I've never really thought about this before, but you do kind of have to make a choice. It's like which one are we going to go for?
The thing is, though, I do think that probably does go back to the thing that I believe Tony was saying, is they probably gave everybody kind of broad strokes, but they let them kind of choose the tone
Mm.
of what they were doing. So, if this person wanted to do something that is admittedly very SNL esque, I don't know. I don't have an excuse for any of the flaws, but I also was entertained by it.
Yeah, no,
So
I was entertained by it too, man. I totally, I hear you. I feel like I have to pay my dues as the invited guest and like
oh,
Oh no, you're
of
totally
course.
right.
you know what I'm saying, and like be like hypercritical of things just so that I can like make Jason like content that he invited me.
No.
I mean, you are, I think, correct. The only time that I've ever disagreed with you on something is when you were completely wrong about Darkman. But
You're
I
never gonna let me
will.
live
Talk about spite.
Oh
Here we
no!
go.
I
Here we
know. I
go.
am never letting go of this. I will go to my grave, and I will.
Well, okay, I'll tell you
My
what.
hand will come up triumphantly as they lower the coffin, and I will be like, David Bowles was wrong about Darkman.
This is gonna be we're gonna go on tour together, and we'll talk when we get to share
Yes.
things at the very end. When we go on tour together, this is going to be a bone of contention, isn't it? Like it's going to come up in every single panel. He's going to be, I love David Bowles. It's great working with him, but he's just wrong in Dark
Isn't
Man.
it wonderful though? I find great joy in realizing that I have works of art that I love, like just completely love, and that I have close friends who just don't see it, who just like
Oh,
it's just not, it's lost, and it's fine. And it's not, and saying it's lost on them is actually a pretentious way to say it. It's just, it does not reflect. It doesn't, there's just nothing there. And
Well,
to
that's
be honest
the
with you,
subjectivity thing.
it just brings me great joy, actually. I love that because it means that there's just so, if there are that many wrinkles in the fabric of the universe, then it means there's so much more joy to be had. If each of us can find joy in something that nobody else can love, it means there's so much more love.
dude, you're like, that's probably the most profound thing I've heard you say on the show, man.
I,
That
well,
was
thank
really
you.
amazing. Somebody please, like,
Magic of horror.
yeah,
There you go.
let's extract
Yeah.
that and like use it. That's really good, man. You brought me
Thank you very much.
I'm
Well,
trying to get in touch with my inner Jason Henderson more often, because there are events in my life that I am working
upcoming
on being.
events.
Yeah, I'm working on being less negative, because like even today, like Jamie was telling me about how the Eclipse Festival in Burnett had been canceled, and that all these people were, had their day ruined, and I was like, fucking hippies. And and Jamie was like, Drew, that's terrible. All those people traveled all that way, all their they're all out lots of money. And then I think, yeah, what is wrong with me? Why am I taking joy in like people having their day ruined?
I have no opinion on that, because as we were talking at the beginning of all this, I somehow missed the whole the love affair with the Eclipse. But so I'm straight down the middle on that one. All right, let's talk about Nahuales.
Wait, Tony had
Wait.
things to say.
Oh, go ahead, Tony,
Yeah,
please.
so
Yeah.
I was thinking about what you were saying about other beats you could do, like even
Yeah.
just like a cell phone where she's calling him like, "Hey, are you coming home?" Like you could just add like quick bits into that to develop their relationship would be
Yeah, you're
great.
right.
I think the ending where they end up in the garbage can is just meant to be funny, because it's two vampires end up in the garbage can, which is kind of funny. Or dumpster. But when you were talking about efficiency, there was a thread going on about Far Side comics, for example, which tell everything in one like deep,
Yes, you're
like
right.
deep story. There was what the example in the thread was a guy who's remembering this tie from a werewolf that's attacking him, and the werewolf, he recognized it from a guy who told him, no, these bullets are silver bullets for sure. And he's shooting at the werewolf guy. That's how he remembers it, like right before he was torn apart. So there's this like in one sentence and a drawing, you have a
Yes.
whole story. And so that efficiency and story you're talking about, like, I think all of us as writers could probably read a few Far Side comics, go, wow, that was accomplished in that. Like, how do we get down to the meat? Like, that's the leanest cut right there, right?
Man.
Although I'm also picturing now, by the way, Drew, like your tour with with David, and just like David opens his laptop and there's just like a post-it note that says "Darkman rules." He's like, oh, I mean, like trading back and forth, and like, you know,
Drew goes
Drew
back to
picks
his
up his
hotel
water
room.
bottle and it's like, wouldn't it be great if Darkman didn't suck? And you're like, oh, David got me again. Like, just this back and forth as far as who can.
It's
who can
going
prank.
to end with us at San Diego Comic-Con of me cosplaying Darkman somehow.
What's the name of Darkman's like?
What would be
His
better
opponent in the first
is-
film. What's his name?
Durant. Durant.
Yeah,
Larry
well,
Drake.
What would be better if it ends in just like David is cosplaying as Darkman, and then everybody asks, and the only answer is don't. He's just dead face. David goes, don't even ask. Why? I thought you hated Darkman. Why are you Darkman? Shut up. Don't.
I'll
don't.
lose a bet with Drew and have to cosplay.
Yeah, it's never revealed. It's just eventually by the end of the tour,
and
David's
Drew's
Darkman,
all
and we
smiling
never.
happily next to me.
Yeah,
Dark
exactly.
David.
Dark
David.
Anyway, yeah, we should move on, but that's
All right. Yes. All right. So Noales, so who wants to take a crack at explaining this story? And I have to say, I did not understand the ending, and I feel terrible about that. I thought this was a very beautiful story and unnerving, like edge of your seat, unnerving, scary.
So if you want to take a crack at it, because I've got some
please.
thoughts. So the story opens with like this CIA operative in Mexico, and what's the area called? Catemaco, right? That's the name of it. And he is, he's got like a corpse on a horse, and he's trying to like he's like looking around, fearful for his life. And he gets into this house and locks the body away in a strange way, and then like calls up the CIA, and they're like, do you have the stuff we need? And he's like, yes, I'm going to hand over all this information, but you got to get me out and now. And they're like, oh no, we're going to pick you up tomorrow. And he's like, dude, you got to get me out now. And then he's basically abducted by nahuales, which are essentially kind of like shapeshifters in Mesoamerican lore, and taken before Madre Tierra, who is like the main leader, the main chamana, the main witch of that group. And she gives like a little speech that's kind of obscure, but one of the things that she says is, they say that the people with the oldest roots in this land were the Olmecs, but before the Olmecs were the Nahuales. And if you know anything about Olmec sculptures and stuff, we don't know much about their culture because they didn't leave any like writing behind, and their descendants eventually like kind of like evolved into other cultural groups. So we can make some assumptions, but we don't know too much about them as a people, just what they left behind. And one of the things that left behind were lots of images of shape-shifting beings, specifically like the main one was jaguar babies, the infant children who are like anthropomorphic jaguars. And they were apparently the people that first either recognized, if you take it literally, or created the idea that humans have a beast soul. That this is what the Aztecs called the Nahuali, the beast soul inside of people. That certain types of adepts, which were also called Nahualis, confusingly, mages or whatever, could bring out of themselves and transform themselves into animals. And so the idea is that this group of people are descended. They've been there since before human beings were. There's a kind of hybrid people who are able to tap into that side of themselves, and they basically sacrifice the CIA agent so they can take his beast soul from him and feed it in some way to their dead ancestors, or and so it's this notion of we were here first. It's been taken from us. All this kind of colonial kind of my kids and I sometimes when we talk about the history of Mesoamerica, we're like, it's it's conquest all the way down. Like it's turtles all
Yeah.
the way down, it's conquest all the way down. Because like everybody was conquered by somebody else, and you get down to the very bottom is like who was here first, right? And that seems to be kind of like the flavor of what's going on here. These are mystical beings who are able to, pull out something like ancestral, an animal in themselves, but something also that like was here first and deserves to be respected and feared, and that the CIA is fucking with, and other people are trying to damage even further than it's already been damaged, and they're trying to reassert that, and there's a certain dignity even in the midst of their violence, whatever. It's a very strange thing. It's a very I saw somebody call it like a Mesoamerican Wicker Man, or that kind of a
Okay.
yeah, where there's like some obscure ritual that has to do with appeasing ancestors or gods or whatever. And this guy who's trying to turn them over to the CIA, thinking of them as a band of criminals, is ends up being sacrificed for the good of that nation or tribe or whatever.
Okay.
I
That's
think
kind of
there's
what I came
something.
away with. Huh?
I think
Go
there's
ahead.
something to that, and then I got the impression it's possible as well that they show two bodies in the background that are wrapped in plastic at the end, kind of
In
Yeah.
a
walls.
like in a wall.
Given how he reacts, there's also the possibility that that's his wife and son, and they were also part of those people, and it's a revenge thing. Like you killed, like he had to get rid of them in order to get extractor. Like part of the whole plot is him like, I was actually the killer of my wife and son, and I'm broken up about it, but that's it. And then there's a revenge part based on, hey, you shouldn't have betrayed us, and you sure shouldn't have killed your loved ones.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, no, I hadn't noticed that. And it's probably just because of the way I was watching it in bits and pieces and amongst doing other things.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed it, but I never but Tony's explanation right now is
that's what I read.
As good an explanation as I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean,
and doesn't Madre Tierra, doesn't she tell him at one point like he's supposed to like go, and the fact that they're able, they're killing him, and then she talks about him having this Nahual inside of himself or whatever. It kind of suggests that like he in some way or another is kind of like part of that community or knows about them in ways that gave him access to them, and that his betrayal, like and this interpretation you've given, which I think is really valid and I like it a lot. He's not only betrayed them, he's killed his family members who are also part of that community to some degree. And it's like an ultimate betrayal. It's like what we call malinchismo in Mexican Spanish, referring to Malinche, the woman who was an indigenous woman translated for Cortez, right, to help ally with the Tlaxcalteca and overthrow the Aztecs. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sorry, I noticed that, but that does make a lot of sense.
I buy it. I saw those two bodies there, and I had I was completely at a loss as
I didn't know what they were either.
Well, they look beastly to me.
You're right. They look like
they're
lizard
wrapped
people
in
to me.
plastic. They're like
they're wrapped in
gangland
plastic.
Kill. Like
they're
in walls.
On my computer, I couldn't see that.
Yeah, they're in the walls, and he looks over at like what may be that area when he's like looking at his photos and stuff. Like that's the impression I got, was because it's a very modern. They're like, it's not like they're in shrouds or anything. They're like, it's like duct tape and plastic.
So am I being too dense when I say it really could have used somebody to? I feel like, I don't know. I feel like we need some dialogue explaining this.
Yes,
I mean, that's a lot.
It could have been that
I'm telling you,
you're doing it and you're writing it and you're going, I don't want to feed too much to people, but then how you pace things feeds into that. So it might have been that, or hey, we only have X amount of days to shoot, right? That also is a big factor. Yeah.
Tony, do you know, did Gigi write the script herself, or did somebody else write the script?
I can't remember. I want to say maybe, but I can't remember. I have to look again. I forgot to look at the credits on that.
Yeah, to me it feels like maybe she wrote it herself, and that's what I'm telling you. Con todo respeto, Gigi, si estás escuchando, I think that she, like, when she doesn't have a really good screenwriter with her, she tends to get lost in her desire to bring out really badass imagery. She's a really good director. She does a great job capturing like startling images. She has a really good feel for like a visual language that's gonna like stick with you for a long time. But I think that sometimes her narrative sense is a little garbled, and she could really benefit from having a good writer kind of like taking her ideas and filtering them through in a way that's going to make it accessible to the audience.
I mean,
Um,
there's not it's not listed in the writers on IMDb, but that doesn't mean anything. And I forgot to look at the. It's my bad for not checking
Oh yeah, no, no. I
those
mean,
in the
I haven't been
credits.
able to
Like,
find it. I'm looking around because there's only, there are 5 directors and only 4 writers, I think,
right.
credited. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if that means that she wrote her own segment. But regardless of if she didn't, if somebody else wrote it, I think that they needed to do like another pass and basically do what Jason is kind of suggesting. Just have some kind of audience insert thing where you
I don't know what
maybe.
it would be exactly. I know
Yeah.
how to do it badly, but we'd have to think pretty hard on how to do
I
it
guess
well.
because everybody in the scene, I mean, I guess there is kind of a naturalness to it. If everybody in the scene knows what the fuck is going on,
Yeah, I think
and
that.
then they all know, and then we're just on the outside, and so it's going to always be obscure to us. But
Yeah.
that's not always the most, even though that might be the most natural, and the most like
Right.
the have the greatest verisimilitude. It may not be the thing that
Well, and the funny
works
thing is,
for
in
the
a
audience.
comic book, Alan Moore can just be there in a
Little caption,
box in
yeah, yeah.
italics, going, and there they are, the son and the wife,
Yeah.
behind the wall chanting, and so we chant today, blah blah blah. Like, yeah,
Like I said, I really do think like I think it was just, hey, I don't want to spoon feed this, but
yeah,
since we're all confused, like, and sometimes I mean, I've had things where like I've had my own stuff where I don't think we need to get into that, and then you like maybe you get an editor and they go, dude, what's with this? What do
yeah.
you, and you go, I thought that was pretty clear. Like,
I
no,
thought
it's
that
not.
was pretty
Like,
clear.
2 or 3 people will tell, and if 2 or 3 people tell you that, then that's the time to really, really listen, right?
Every
Like,
writer should have a coffee cup that says, "I thought that was pretty clear."
I mean, and it happens like because you're in your. I mean, it's why I hire the producer I do for my album, because he's not
Yeah.
going to let, like, sometimes you hire people to be jerks. Not that I'm saying he's a jerk, but like sometimes you hire that person who can tell you like, no, you need to listen to me and not yourself, because you're too into it, and that's natural. That's the forest for the trees thing is there, right? I will say that Gigi had some of the best stories in the Q&A for this, like, of all the people, because they went into the jungle, like deep into the heart
To
of black magic.
Yeah, to Katemako, right? That's where they went. Yeah.
Yeah, and there were shamans there like watching them, and they were creeped out because some old guy showed up, and they were like, I don't. And she and her crew kind of knew, and there were some guys from Europe, if I remember correctly. I can't remember, Canada and Europe maybe, or one or both of those. And everybody else was like, oh man, this isn't a good feeling. Like I know kind of where this is. And then they were like, they came back and said, hey, who's screaming? Why are you screaming? And they're like, we were filming. What are you talking about? We're screaming. Like, we're rolling sound. Like, what do you mean? We heard you cry out in pain and call us.
Goodness.
And everybody at the set, was going.
I'd nope out of there real fast.
They wanted to. There were enough stuff that it was not a fun time for several people on that crew after realizing that. And everybody by the end went, this is far too much creepy stuff for us to just dismiss. And let's not film there again, kind of is the, like, yeah, it was really like the amount of just weird random things like that that happened was enough to just said they wanted to leave, of course. And then they're like, we still have to finish the shoot. But it was a fascinating and terrifying shoot for a lot of
It's
people.
to watch it. It triggers something atavistic and just terrifying. I found this to be a deeply unsettling.
Oh
Just
yeah.
there's something about being plunged into the jungle like that and feeling the vulnerability of that is really unnerving. It just unlocks a fear, at least in me, and I thought it was extraordinarily effective. I mean, so
Yeah.
I was confused about the ending, but but setting that aside, I thought it was terrifying, and I was really amazed by that.
Well, you're not alone because some of the crew was absolutely terrified by
Yeah,
being there too. So, I mean, that's double effective, right? It's like when you hear people go, we filmed in this, haunted asylum, and that was
yeah,
fine until this happened.
yeah,
Like, it's always kind of how those work. And this was in the same. But I would be probably even more. I think I would be more scared if you're going to, the root of black magic in a jungle in a country. I think that's even scarier than I'm in a haunted,
yeah.
asylum. like, like
I
there's a
get
certain gravity, and that's like other things they heard, things that like I don't know of an animal that sounds like that. You know.
Yeah,
okay. Guys, I want you to know a little bit more about this place, Catemaco, which is a coastal city in Veracruz. It was first, inhabited by the Olmecs. It was like a perfect place for her to be filming this. But
mm,
it is literally the witchcraft capital of
Yeah,
Mexico.
yeah, that's what she was saying.
They have this annual national congress of witches of
Uh-huh.
Catemaco, and they hold a black mass. For like 5,000 people are in attendance. It's crazy what
It
goes
sounds
on
like
there.
Glastonbury in England.
Yeah,
mm.
it's a lot like that kind of thing. And it's the event started the modern event started like in the 70s. And so it's not just like practitioners of black magic. They're also like curanderas and shamans and psychics and fortune tellers and stuff like
Of course, yeah.
that. But it is a tourist attraction for those very reasons. So you wonder if maybe some people were like just kind of like having a bit of fun with this film
Sure.
crew.
I mean,
And
it's
the locals like,
entirely possible. The none of the people seem to think that that was the case, right? Like whatever they did, they were very effective.
yeah,
If that was their,
I love it.
because everybody was talking about like, yeah, we did a cleansing, and we followed the rules of what people told us the rules because we didn't want to take any chances at all, and everybody tried to hold to that because it was scary enough. Which and those are the kind of stories like that I like hearing at a fest that at like it adds that extra context, and that's again maybe why there is kind of this idea like, oh, you saw that at the fest, like you have these fest goggles nostalgia because you get this context of like, whoa, this is what actually made it. And you forget like when somebody goes, hey, I thought that was kind of okay, oh yeah, that's because you can't possibly have it.
Yeah, you
Sure.
don't have this. You weren't
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
All right. So we should get to. I know that we're running a little bit long, so let's. There's only really one segment left, and then a hell of a like a Halloween. I think it's. I can't remember 4 or 5 that has an almost identical sequence. But the next segment is the Hammer of Zanzibar. We were talking about the fact that it stars Jonah Ray Rodriguez, or as he's known in Hollywood, Jonah Ray, who has a comedy show with Kumail Nanjiani and is, I think, most well known to me as a host of MST3K in its newest incarnations and on Netflix. But it's a comedy story involving his. I'm having a hard time summarizing this story. It's almost a Robert Rodriguez pastiche, basically,
I
where
would almost say it's I mean, you're not wrong. There is a
yeah,
lot of Robert Rodriguez in it, but there's also a lot of Sam Raimi and
yes,
and
yes,
Tarantino as well. But I guess those are that's kind of all of the sort of that same.
yeah. It's all
Raimi's a
part.
little older, but it's sort of that same generation of filmmaker.
Yeah, essentially what it comes down to is Jonah Ray is facing off against a demon that has been murdering his friends, and he tells a long, very funny story about how he got his hands on the one weapon that can stop
Well,
this.
it's kind of a what they would call a Shaggy Dog story.
What is that? Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
Well, Shaggy Dog story is like it's a humorous. It's not necessarily a joke. I mean, it's a story. It's too long to be a
Right.
joke, but it is part of a comedic tradition where you're telling sort of a long rambling story that's humorous.
Yeah.
But you know, with this, the way it's set up is that he's meeting his ex-girlfriend in this Mexican restaurant that they apparently both like, and they allude to seeing some sort of ritual, and one by one their friends are being possessed by different demons. And that's when he starts to go, well, no, it's after he calls out the ex-girlfriend for being possessed,
Oh,
and
that's
they
right.
start to get into a fight, and she's like, no human weapon can hurt me. And he's like, yes, that's why I found the hammer of Zanzibar. Cue theme music. And that's
Well,
when it jumps into the side story.
Yes.
yeah, and the whole thing. This is another one. I'm not trying to skip to the end, but this is another one where the end confused me because he says, I know none of this is real because this restaurant doesn't even exist anymore, something like that. And he's like, and I remember everything about the ritual because I videoed it, even though I wasn't supposed to remember it. And now like the demon wants to get out through the video. I don't know. Anyway, but the thing is, at the end, when you come back to this restaurant and everybody's dead, and I'm like, wait, I thought the restaurant and the people didn't even exist. So is this all again? It's like I'm confused again about the ending. I'm like, is this all just now he's been possessed with a demon and he's actually killed a bunch of people? Is that what happened? I don't know that whole thing.
I like
Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I like to think that the what was King Zombie, the demon that possesses his girlfriend's body, pretends to make the people fade away so that when he pulls out his human weapons and starts attacking, he's actually killing people in the restaurant.
Right.
Because that's the only way that works for me, because otherwise it's like a cheat that I don't like, where
well, it certainly is over quickly. I mean, it because normally you have a plan, you go at the monster with the plan, and something goes wrong with the plan and you need a new plan. That's how stories work. But in this case, no.
But no, he was prepared for the thing to go wrong. And so what we do is get, like what Drew said, is the side story about how he goes with the last of his friends to die before his girlfriend gets possessed. The last of his friends to be possessed and die. Miguel, I think he's called. Then they go to that store run by El Jefe, which is really, and I love this. Is just a little kind of a joke, because the director is from Cuba, but like the actor, like the Miguel and El Jefe are both like Mexican, and they're talking about, oh, it's like Cuban, and then El Jefe goes, "Ay, pinches cubanos," and it's so funny because there is like this like Mexican Cuban kind of rivalry thing, and so it was cute. Right. I thought it was great that the Cuban director would be like, "Oh, fucking Cubans."
Yeah.
The El Jefe part of this, to me, is the best part of the. I don't know if I'm alone in thinking, but like
I think it was great too. I thought it was great too. You know what it reminded me of, Drew? The Pulp Fiction thing where Bruce Willis's dad talks about the watch.
Yes.
Christopher Walken. Yeah, Christopher Walken.
Oh, Christopher Walken going on and about the watch and how he had to hide it in his ass during
this long, faintly ridiculous story,
like kind of repulsive, but at the same time like totally absorbing. Yes, I thought it was great.
Hilarious.
Every moment I was like, just and then he was like, and then I brought him gifts and chicken heads and flowers and everything to bring him back, and he was all like, yes, what do you want? I loved it. It was great. Just imagining his jealousy of this well-endowed demon. It was just hilarious.
Well, and Jonah Ray's response being, I'm really glad
I don't need to hear any.
But
I'm not touching that thing. I'm sorry.
As soon as his friend becomes possessed of a demon and he uses it, and then El Jefe uses it to kill the demon friend, he's like, okay, I'll take it. Take it.
Right. Well, the prop is great. Like
it really is. Part of the making of this was to kind of see if he could get away with, like, can I get this and make this prop and tell this story? Will they let me do this? And the answer is, hey, yes. And then, like, here we go.
Yeah, that is.
So the joke was the meta joke of like, will they let me just tell this story about this demon? Demon penis. Like, can I do this? And the answer is yes. Here you go. Here's your segment.
Yeah,
go with grace, which is pretty good.
But I mean, I don't think it was overly. I mean, I think it was funny and whatever. But I also, before we jumped on, Jason was talking about somebody who reviewed it and was really kind of
Yeah, it was
freaked out by the thing.
RogerEbert.com, and they were super offended by it. They felt like it
Yeah,
was essentially they reacted as though it was homophobic.
and I don't think it was at all. I think it was the kind of jokes that I don't know. I mean, just from my
Well, the
perspective,
joke to me
The joke would
isn't
have
that
worked if it was
a
heterosexual.
woman.
I mean,
Yeah, like I don't. They don't. The joke doesn't seem that it doesn't seem based around whether or not the guy is gay or not. It seems based around the idea that he's a jilted lover and
and that he cuts off. Yeah, he does this
it,
Bobbit kind of thing on.
yeah, like yeah, and as Jason just said, would have worked if it was a woman. Like the thing that's funny about it is that this guy is talking about having sex with this extremely well hung demon like it's the most mundane thing in
Yeah,
the world.
the fact that it's a demon, that's so weird, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Um
And then that would become the weapon is also
yeah.
an additional ridiculousness, which
but we go into a movie. There are times I know, and I'm sure that this has happened to me as well. Something catches you on a bad day, or you're hearing things the way that you're going to hear them, and it has nothing to do whatever with what the
well,
director was interested in. That's how you're going to hear the art that day, and I think that's what happened with this person
I
writing.
I tell
And
people
Roger
all the
Ebert.
time, I liken it the nerdy analogy for me is the cave tree from Empire.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you bring in what you bring in. And
Mm.
if lots of people and sometimes you can't help it. Like if you had a bad day,
yeah,
maybe you're not gonna I look there was a what was this Schwarzenegger? Was it Twins, the one where he's with
yeah. With Danny
uh
DeVito. Yeah.
yeah. So I hate that movie because I wanted to see Hellraiser 2 and they wouldn't let me see Hellraiser 2. And I had to watch Twins with my cousins and my brother. And I did
That's
not.
horrifying.
I wanted to see Hellraiser 2 and not Twins. And I don't know if I rewatched. I think I watched it and it was, it's okay. But no joke was funny in that movie because some decided I was 3 months away from being old enough to see the movie I wanted to see and I couldn't.
I
And
hear you, my brother.
that
I
joke
do.
was nothing was funny. I like those actors and that movie was probably fine, but I tell you what, there was nothing more grating than Twins that night. So so that's how sometimes that kind of stuff happens. And it was never gonna be, no matter what I thought
Yeah.
Hellraiser 2 was going to be, which ended up being still my favorite. Nothing was going to be as good as that night either, right? So I mean, I totally agree. Like whatever's in your brain it's nice when film can wash that away when you see something that just wow, you know what? I went in, I was grumpy, or or I had this feeling and then I saw this movie and I had a different feeling and it was the power of cinema like changed that for me. Nothing's better than that, or a few things are better than that, right? Like I won't say nothing, but like that is transformative. But that's hard to get. That's lightning in a bottle, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, you have to be open to that feeling too and not glowering because you couldn't see Hellraiser 2. So I absolutely get it, and it could be, or it could be just I feel this way about certain comedy. I mean, Jason, you said something like I just don't like broad comedy until you find something that works for you, and then you're like, well, I like this broad comedy.
Yes. Yeah. And
So there you go.
there's no answering to that. Like it's not possible. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, my heart goes out to the man or woman writing for RogerEbert.com who was offended by it, and I hear you. All right.
I feel like the
Yeah.
existence of this whole sketch though is simply so they can have the joke when they go back to the wraparound that they went, oh, the cops killed him, and he was like, no, he was a white guy surrounded by dead Mexicans. They just assumed that he had survived a gang related shooting or something,
and he was fine.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
like that
Yep.
is the, like, if this if the whole thing exists as far in my mind just for that joke.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong.
No, I'm
I think
sure.
you're right.
I think you're exactly right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. And that brings us back to the end of the wraparound story when Efren Ramirez says, "Well, time's up," and King Demon is here. What's he Drew, what's he called again? I'm sorry, I don't even
San
remember.
La Morte, or Saint
San La
Saint
Muerte.
Death. Yeah, Saint
Yeah.
Death.
Yeah. And like I say, he has two forms. He comes in initially in a cloak and a cowl and a hat and a white mask. And then that is shed. And I didn't even notice when it was shed. Like I didn't see
Well,
the
he's
point.
getting
Shot
shot.
off.
He's getting
Oh, just
shot.
shot off.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
And David, what the hell is the visage that is underneath? What is the meaning of that?
Well, so I mean, that's San La Muerte is just a kind of how can I explain it? A syncretic version of a god of death from South America, a lot like La Santa Muerte is in Mexico. In Mexico, La Santa Muerte is a syncretic combination of Mictecacihuatl, who was the Aztec goddess of the underworld, and the Virgin Mary, and also, I guess, like the figure of death, like Godmother Death from Europe. And something similar happened in South America as well, like this blending. But in South America, they went with the male figure, whereas in Mexico, they went with the female figure. Usually, these indigenous god deities are indigenous death deities are dualities. And so there's like a male, a feminine, and masculine counterpart that together make up death. And just like in Mexico, it is a figure that is worshipped by people that live in precarious lives, either because they're involved in illegal things or because they're in poverty or whatever. And the church throughout the Americas discourages people from worshiping this figure, but they do anyway. So it's definitely like a dark kind of occult figure, but also one that just some regular poor people worship. Close to our house in Oaxaca, as I will always mention every time I come on this podcast, I do have a house on the coast of Oaxaca, which is really cool. And about 20 minutes away from there is a shrine just there on the highway, a really nice shrine that's kept up by these little old ladies to La Santa Muerte. And there are like images, effigies of it, and people, you light candles and you put out offerings and stuff like that to, especially to protect your loved ones who live dangerous lives or who do dangerous work, even people who work like in the oil fields or who drive trucks, whatever, anything where you can be exposed to danger, you call upon the figure of death to protect you. And so, it was fascinating to see. And the makeup for that second image, the black skeleton is like this. So it was worth the entire movie.
It's
to
really
see that
cool.
last scene
It is a
and see death walking in.
Yeah.
It is really,
It
what the
seems to be
mask
made of
the
wood.
first mask kind of, the first one, it reminds me a lot of, is it Jason and the Argonauts? I can't remember, like the statue that comes to life. It's got like a face. It's kind of like
Talos.
this Greek kind of, it has something like that, but also maybe something vaguely Japanese as well. I'm not sure. I'm like you. I can't put my finger on what it is, but it's inspired by something. But it's not inspired by something Mesoamerican. It's something else. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something indigenous South America, like Peruvian or something that I'm not familiar with. But yeah, so that's what's going on there, and the figure is great, and the way it can just like lift its hands and like gesture and cause people to like turn their weapons on each other and on themselves. Like you can't stop death. Death is just death. What do you do?
It's
Even
really wonderful.
the sort of holy weapon that he has, which is the Saint Killer gun.
Only gives him 90 minutes.
Yeah.
He's immediately afterwards. He's like, he again goes back to the 90 minutes because I think it's like you don't stop death. You can make it go away for a while, but that's what I took away from it, right?
Yeah, and he's been running for his whole existence, and he always just is one step ahead, which is there is something
really cool. I love it.
There's something folkloric about that. That notion that here is a man who is always just a step ahead of death. That's
it's
beautiful.
Sort of shades. And this is admittedly, a Eurocentric view of it, but it's sort of shades of Jack-o'-lantern, like the original story there, Yeah. But I would watch a whole movie series about this character.
I was like, fuckers, this is what you should have been doing this whole time. Like it's interesting to have him like telling these stories, but like I now need to see a movie with Efren Ramirez playing the traveler across like centuries one step ahead of death.
Yes.
That I would like a limited series on Max or something like that. I would
And
put down good money to watch that.
and I like that this is an actor that I think most people think of him in a very broad, ridiculous role because of Napoleon
Because of Napoleon.
Dynamite, and he absolutely is 180 degrees away with that. He has gravitas. He's
Big time.
cool. Like, you want to know more about this guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just thinking, what David was just saying, you could do other movies with this guy. When you think about it, this is what's happening in The Fugitive, because The Fugitive is always just a step ahead of Inspector Javert, whatever he's
Yeah.
called in that show. And it's always, I'm going to help this orphanage. I'm going to save this. I'm going to get this doctor back together with his daughter before the doctor dies of old age or whatever. And then he gets that done just in time for Inspector Javert to show up, and then the fugitive has to be on the run again. And that's.
I was going to say, this is like early to be plugging stuff, but just to a comic that I work on, that I edit and that I write the frame story for, is Katrina's Caravan for Chispa Comics, and in each one of those has got a short story written by a Latino writer of horror, and the frame story is this caravan that is kind of managed by this skeletal figure called Katrina, and they go from town to town, and she always tells like a frightening story to the audience that ends in horrifying ways, and there's suggestion that the audience may not like survive the storytelling, but she and her caravan are also like one step ahead of this priest that's following them. So when I reached the end of it, I was like, fuck me. Somebody is going to think that I ripped this movie off, and I just barely watched it today. So anyway,
they won't think that, because the way things work now, I promise you, the way things work now, when something's been out for 18 months, it may as well have come out in the 40s. We're
and as you guys are suggesting, this is also just something that's in the air. And stories like this have been told again and again.
Yeah.
It's also just not worth it to worry about people thinking you ripped off something.
And besides which, even if I did rip them off, like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's true too. You make it better.
Everybody rips everybody else off, and like that didn't work.
Okay, so let's get to our final thoughts, and then we'll go to endorsements. So the order was David, Julia, Drew, and then Tony, and then we'll go to endorsements. I'll skip the final thoughts, but I might have an endorsement if I think of one, or maybe not. Who knows? David, we've spent a long time talking about Satanic Hispanics. What are your thoughts?
I was going to say, you always should know ahead of time. Oh, we're writing David. We're going to have a 2-hour show. Okay, great. No,
it's not just you.
It's not you, my friend. No.
I know. Trust me. I've listened to every single episode of this podcast. So
that is so bizarre. Okay, yes. Go
I love you guys. It's great. I feel like I'm just enjoying my friends every single week that you guys put something out. I'm glad we had this conversation. I have a newfound appreciation for the two segments that I wasn't really like super keen on. It does feel like something that bears a rewatch. Maybe once we get back to spooky season. I love the centering of Latina and Hispanic voices. And I thought there was, as you always say, Jason, in every single one of these segments, there was at least a scene or an image that was worth it existing. And that is, something that we can't say about some other of Eduardo Sanchez's films, for example. But Jingo.
I wouldn't know, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sorry. He's not ever made anything I liked. My final thoughts are that it's a fun film, nice popcorn film, worth popping in, sitting around with some friends, and it's definitely a show that lends itself to like commenting on as you're watching.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a lot with limited resources, some good, some solid performances, some clever ideas and clever imagery. I agree that the last, the last creature is really awesome. The what would you call the second iteration? Are they both, because they're both
They're both San La
San La
Muerte.
Muerte? Okay, so what would you call the
So
second
definitely
one?
the second one is San La Muerte. Yeah. as if to say, like, instead of saying Santa, it's like San because it's a guy, right?
Yes,
La Muerte.
San la Muerte, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a really memorable image for sure. But yeah, I think we've, done a pretty good job of kind of covering the pros and cons of it, or rather the ups and downs, I guess. But yeah, it was enjoyable for sure. I'm glad that we covered it, and I'm glad David joined us.
Yeah. Drew, what about you?
Always fun to discuss things with David. Always fun to visit the anthology format. For my part, this movie survived two viewings relatively close to each other, so I think that that's solidly a thumbs up from me. Whether or not it'll go on to be like a new cult classic or whatever, only time will tell for that. But definitely has some arresting images and some entertaining aspects in each segment. And I think if you like the anthology format a lot, this is one of the better ones to come out recently. I dig it.
Very good. Thank you
Also,
very much.
the pop punk song that they play during the Hammer of
Yes.
Zanzibar is very catchy.
No,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
pretty good. I like
Tony,
it.
what about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, I wanted everybody to see this after it showed at Fantastic Fest. And there's a lot going on that year that in horror, so that was really cool. I'm glad we're doing it. I think it's a lot of fun. I get the criticisms, like I think a lot of them are fair, but I also like the idea of, I want more of this. I want more people to go, hey, look, here I have a voice. Let's like that. I don't know. I'm always about that. Like that's, and again, why I like film festivals that aren't just, Hollywood centric. Like, the idea of, hey, it's us, we're doing this, and it's Satanic Hispanics, and that's gonna be funny too. Like, we're gonna all like, I dug that format. I dug why it's being done, and then I like the people doing it. Like, I like what they bring to the table. It made me want to watch. Then I was like, oh man, you know what? I kind of want to watch Want of the Dead again. I want to watch these people's movies again. So I had fun. I like the comedy. It works for me. I'm okay with all of it. And it's why I was recommending it early on, and was excited when it finally came to Shudder or got distribution. Like,
Yeah.
I don't there's some other movies that I'll probably mention, like that this year there was like a movie coming out called Disappear Completely,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just about to come to Netflix, which that's fascinating. There's one called Evil Eye, and I'm not sure if it got distribution. So there's a bunch of stuff that I see, and I'm like, I want everybody to see these things that would be good companions to this. So I like it. I watched again, and I think the framing sequence again, like I would watch Traveler. If anybody
Yes.
wants to make a Traveler series, I'm down with that. Although the
Yeah.
more we talked about it, the more I go, is he ever gonna cross over with the 70s Hulk show?
Yes.
It's like at one point, like, hey, Green Friend, death's right up 90 minutes away.
He's gonna team up with the Hulk, the Jada Pinkett's character from Demon Knight.
Yes.
There you
And
go.
the guy from and the Fugitive. Yeah,
Right,
it'll
right.
be the League of Wondering Heroes.
That would be
great idea.
fantastic. This sounds like it should be an offshoot comic for sure. Anyway, there's your Lava Shark comic publishing right there.
And we're gonna be a new entry.
By the way, I just wanted to remark that it's amazing to me that this movie came out ostensibly it was created in 2022, but it really didn't come out in the United States until the very end of 2023. So that just gives you a hint of how long it actually takes for a film to sort of wind its way around to the audience.
There's still movies that I've seen that don't have distribution,
Right.
I have to buy them from elsewhere, or even have distribution at all in any kind of way you can purchase or see them right now. And that
Absolutely.
always is sad and like fascinating. And I think as artists, as creators, we want people to see our work. And in this age of streaming and how things work internationally, like sometimes it's easier than others. But
Yeah.
luckily we did get this one, so that was good.
All right. So that was wonderful, and I'm really glad that we talked about this. But before I say goodbye to everybody, let's get our endorsements. David, do you have anything to endorse with us this week?
Oh yeah, so I've seen some pretty cool movies recently. I mean, the one I definitely recommend is Late Night with the Devil. Oh my god, that movie is so amazing. I love it so much. Great, great, great. But I've also been like just trying to find a bunch of like female serial killer or axe murderer kind of films, and so I've watched things like Cold Meats,
Mm.
which came out recently. And it's actually pretty good. Like just a kind of a small film with just a couple of characters in a really intense environment. Abigail, which was a lot better than it had any right to be. A horror film that came out last year. All these I watched on Amazon Prime. I saw a couple of older films.
Wait,
One called
isn't Abigail
Inside.
the name of that vampire ballerina movie that's
Yeah, but
coming
this
out?
is yeah. But this
Different?
that's. I'm glad you brought it up because it's not that movie.
Oh, okay. I was confused. I was like,
It's
that's not
what
out yet.
yeah, this is one from last year called Abigail. That's about a girl kind of like she's a serial killer, child of a serial killer. She's a serial killer. Major spoiler, sorry. And then I saw a movie called Inside from 2007, and then The Great American Mary, because I'm just trying to get myself in the mood for this really great comic that Drew Edwards and I are writing together. That's going to be coming
Dun,
out in
dun,
2025.
dun.
So cool. That is really cool.
Called The Matron, and it's basically us putting our heads together based on an idea that Drew had for a long time about like what would it be like if there were a sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre that was centered on a matriarch in the family. And we decided to collaborate on something and came up with a really I think it's going to blow people's minds how utterly iconic this new horror character is going to be. I think that people are going to love it. They're going to eat up the comics.
No pun
And
intended.
yes. And it will be, yes, she will come slicing her way into your lives in 2025. So it's all about hill country, Czech and Chicano people, and poverty and
Gentrification.
and yeah, and axes being swung at people's heads. So that's
And just like the Fast and the Furious franchise, it's about family.
it is about family ultimately. The family that eats together stays together, right?
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. Julia, do you have anything to endorse?
I think, it's funny, this weekend we had hurricane force winds here in Denver, so our power got knocked out, so we decided to go to the movies, and we watched In the Land of Saints and Sinners, which is a small Liam Neeson movie, takes place in Ireland. And he's an assassin who has decided that, he's done, he's ready to retire, and that's it. He's just gonna the
Like you
rest of the
do.
movie is just him having a good retirement. No, that's not at all what the rest of the movie is. It's a fun movie where it takes place during the IRA in 1974, during like the height of the IRA, activity. And so these IRA folks have wandered into his town, and so his dream of retiring maybe is put on hold while he deals with these guys because they're making trouble. But it's actually really interesting how it deals with them, because it's not black and white. It's not like these are the bad guys. They're definitely the bad guys, but they're very complicated bad guys. They have like they have their set of morals, especially the lead female, who's just great. So anyway, it's a really neat picture.
Yeah, that was what a great way to spend the day without power. That was really fun.
Mhm.
We just went to the movies, went and got tacos. It was just delightful. Drew, what about you? What do you got?
The inability to unmute myself, apparently. I first off, I watched a new movie. Speaking of things that remind you of Robert Rodriguez, I watched a new vampire movie, or new to me anyway, on Tubi, which was one of their original films, called Slay, which is about drag queens who accidentally get booked, or maybe not so accidentally, spoilers, get booked at a biker bar out in the middle of the boonies, and end up having to defend the bar from a roving pack vampires, and it's very shades of From Dusk Till Dawn. It definitely,
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of people comparing it to that, and at one point From Dusk Till Dawn is even name dropped into in the movie, so of no doubt that it is a big influence on it. But it's also fun, and it's all, its own right. It's not perfect, like it's very low budget, and you can kind of see that in it, in multiple places, particularly some of the gore and vampire effects. But it's entertaining enough, and the leads are sympathetic enough and interesting enough to where you can kind of forgive that stuff. It's also just cool to see a queer centered vampire movie like this, where you get to see drag queens fighting vampires in like a sort of action hero type role, which I don't think up until a few years ago, with like the increasing popularity of shows like Drag Race and Dragula, I don't think you would have seen that necessarily. But drag has become more, even as it's been embattled
Yeah.
on the state level, it's become more and more popular than ever before. And I think the fact that we now have a horror film centered around it speaks to that. So I found it very entertaining and very charming. And I like also when I get get a chance to plug an indie horror movie, I'll that is kind of going beneath the cracks. Always do that. I also, on the other end, I'm going to echo all the praise that's being put upon X-Men 97 on Disney Plus. It is perfect. It is actually better than the show that it is based on. But like, also, the X-Men are probably more timely now than they ever have been. And I think that the show is a great way to, reintroduce the idea of the X-Men to maybe some of the younger generation, because it perfectly encapsulates everything that, you probably like about these characters
Yeah.
in animated form, which is usually my preferred. I tend to prefer, as much as it's been cool to see all the live action movies over the last 2 decades, I do always tend to prefer when people are adapting superheroes, the animated adaptations tend to always be my favorites. And this is a good example why. Like, this is arguably the best Marvel show in a long ass time. Like, it's really good. So Slay, then X-Men 97, both of which I think have similar themes of tolerance towards people that are different than you. So there you
Nice.
go.
Nice. That's really great. Tony, what about you?
Well, luckily, you can carry that tolerance message and revenge into Monkey Man, which features a whole trans community in, like, that's part of the culture. That's like that becomes part of it. That it was fascinating and interesting in the action. As much as I sometimes like kind of pulled back action, like the cuts and choreography in this are great. I think it's sad that, not sad. That's probably the wrong word. A lot of people are comparing it to John Wick. But it's not John Wick. The fact that he has a suit and there is some guns does not make it John Wick. I hope that we go, and in fact, that if you go to the Draft House, Dev Patel actually filmed a here's what influenced me, and it's so much broader and better. And the homages, if you get them, are great. There's like Enter the Dragon, and there's just it's fantastic. And I like the John Wick movies, but it did highlight like how our attention spans are, how I wish that people's knowledge was a tiny bit broader. But that's okay. You can still like Monkey Man, and it could be your new John Wick. It's fine. But I really liked, the cast is great. It's got, I mean, the vibe is like, it's gritty where it needs to be. It doesn't pull punches. That's literally and figuratively. It says a lot about class, about it. It's just, oh, there's so much to like,
Yeah.
and it is brutal. It is a brutal movie that doesn't lay off once it's going. I saw it the other night, and it's worth the hype in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And yeah. Oh man, I can't wait. That's definitely one I'll be getting as soon as it's out. Like on if there's a 4K of that, that's me. I've also kind of really been enjoying The Gentleman, which it depends on if you like Guy Ritchie doing Guy Ritchie things. It's great. Like it's if that's not your bag, this is not for you. But to me, it's always, and that's fine. But I like what he's doing. Like I'm back for that. It's great. I've said, sometimes you want just a really good pizza, a really good hamburger, and it is satisfying. And it's like, I know a root beer, whatever your favorite beer is, whatever that thing is that you're like, hey, I'm back, or whatever movie. Like this is my jam, and I just want to see this right now. But the fact it gets to play out over a bunch of episodes is kind of,
Yes.
I think that's cool. Like it broadens it. So I've been really enjoying that. And then, like I said, Disappear Completely is coming out. If you can find Evil Eye, there's several other things that would fit into the Satanic Hispanics thing. But those are the things I've seen recently, and I'm excited about these things.
Beautiful. Thank you very, very much. I have nothing to add because I was with Julia, and I totally agree about In the Land of Saints and Sinners. I just want to say thank you to our special guest, David. Wonderful to have you joining us. Julia, a hell of an inspiration. That was fantastic. She was like, these guys mentioned Mesoamerica, and
I wouldn't have David on the show. Yeah,
I was gonna actually suggest too. I was gonna raise my hand, and then I got a message like, "Hey, David's gonna be on." I'm like, yes.
Well, thank you.
And it's so exciting to hear of your collaboration with Drew. I think that's
it's
really wow.
it's going to be a hell of a comic book. Like
Yes.
we're just now getting to the point that we can talk about it more, and it's the more we reveal of it, I think the more people are going to fall in love with this new super bad guy, super bad girl, I guess in this case.
Yeah, she's going to become an icon, and as we reveal artists and publishers, stuff like that, people will just continue to get excited, and just look for us at New York Comic Con is all I'm saying. So anyway, we'll see. Yep.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you, and be kind to one another, and let us know on the Facebook page if you think that we were right on with this, or if we were full of a lot of hot air. We're always interested in that. And
I'm always full of hot air. I love the sound of my own voice. So
I think
you and me both, brother. So okay.
Yeah.
Everyone, have a fantastic evening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Adios.
Night.